Hello everyone, welcome to another Quad Education Test Prep Fundamentals video. My name is Tom, and today we're going to be talking about a topic from the SAT and ACT that is absolutely essential for you to know to be successful with punctuation questions. This is also a topic that if you really commit to it, you will generally become a better writer, and that's something that everybody can benefit from. That topic is clauses. So, let's take a look. Okay, let's do some definitions. First, we're talking about clauses, so what is a clause? Well, it's a pretty broad term, but I'd say a clause is basically a discrete thought. And that's not to say a complete or incomplete thought. We'll come back to that in a moment. But for now, let's just say that a clause is a little thought in a sentence. Okay, we're going to talk about two kinds of clauses today, and those kinds are independent and dependent. When I'm working with AP, Lit, and Lang students, they like to try to bring up other kinds of clauses, but we're only doing those two because those are the only two that are relevant to the test. Okay, let's talk about the basic elements of any clause. So first we have the subject, which you'll see me indicate as an S, and that is the doer of the action. We have the verb, which is the action, very important, that will be V. And then we finally have the object, which is the receiver of the action, and that will be O. We're going to practice identifying these in a second, so put a pin in that as well. So final definitions here. Let's talk about what an independent and dependent clause actually are. So what an independent clause is, it is a clause that can stand on its own. You'll often hear that, or a complete thought. And what do clauses need to be complete? Well, you need a subject and a verb, and often an object, but not necessarily. So basically, every complete sentence, complete thought, will have something doing anything. And that's what makes a clause complete. And so then what is a dependent clause? Well, if an independent clause was complete, it stands to reason that a dependent clause is then incomplete. And then the question that results from that is, what could make a clause incomplete? Well, it would mean that it was missing some of the important elements that made a clause complete. So that could be that we could be missing the verb, we could be missing the subject, we could really honestly be missing both. And very interestingly, our last option here, we have a subject, verb, and object already, but we have some special word in front of the subject, verb, and object that effectively makes the clause incomplete. So it's sort of a subtraction by addition kind of instance. So take a second and think about that. Are there any sorts of words that you can think of putting in front of a sentence to make that clause that was complete now incomplete? Okay, that's it for definitions. Now let's take a look at some examples. Okay, I pulled out some examples here, and take a second now to look through them and do a couple of things for me. First, identify the subject, verb, and object in each clause. Some of them don't have all of those things, so if you cannot find it, don't worry about it. The second thing that I'd like for you to do is identify whether the clause in question is complete or incomplete. And the third thing is specifically for option number 5, where the asterisk is, think of a word and write it down that you could put in front of I walk to school to make that dependent. So a bit of a giveaway that that one's definitely independent. All right, give it a look. Okay, let's look through these. First one here, pretty straightforward. The dog wags her tail. The dog is the subject, and wags is the verb, and her tail is the object. Pretty straightforward. Number 2 there, I can't swim. I'm not a very good swimmer. That's true. The first subject there is I, the only subject. Can't, that's a verb. Swim, that's also a verb. So both of these together are verb elements, and there is no object in this sentence. And sorry, going back really quickly, this is independent because it has a subject, verb, and an object. And this just has a subject and a verb, and that's still enough to be independent. Going on to option number 3, the best place to do your prep homework is a place similar to where you'll take your test. Good hint there. That is very true. So this is a little trickier because where is the verb? Well, it's just is. So just because it's really short, it can still be a verb. So is the verb here. And then the subject is the best place to do your prep homework. So all of that is actually the subject. And then everything else, a place where that's similar to where you'll take your test, that's all object. So very long subject and object there, but really short verb. And that will happen a lot of time on this test. And since we can see that there is a subject, verb, and object here, we can say that this is all independent as well. Looking at the fourth option here, up on top of the tall statue is a traffic cone from England. It's a very interesting image. So this is interesting. We can go ahead and say that is the verb right there because it still is the verb. But then what is the subject? Well, up on top of the tall statue isn't really doing anything. It's more that the traffic cone is the thing that is doing something. And so this is an example, and maybe in previous videos I've mentioned this, that you can flip the subject and the object in English, and it's totally okay. So we actually have the subject coming after the verb in this one, and the object being first, and we still have an object, a verb, and a subject, making that independent. Okay, looking at 5 with our asterisk here, I'm going to go ahead and come back to the adding the word at the beginning and just go kind of through this same process for all of these first. I walk to school, pretty similar to the dog wagged her tail, I being the subject, walk being the verb, and to school being the object for a nice independent clause. But then walking to school, well, that's not a sentence. We need to know what happened when you were walking. So this is an instance where it being dependent, you can sort of feel this suspense. And that's a really good way for you to be able to tell whether it's independent or dependent because we don't really know what's going on here. So I would call this just basically a verb-ish by itself, and then to school being an object. However, for our next example there, well, however isn't a verb. You can't however something, can you? And also however can't really do anything. So this is an example, and however also isn't an object here. So this is an example of just none of any of them, which is certainly going to make this dependent. And here with number 8, we have the blue whale. And I don't know anything about what the blue whale is doing, so I can pretty confidently conclude that this is dependent as well. And we can just say really that this is just a subject by itself because the blue whale can certainly do something, but we don't know what it's doing. In our final example here, we have cars that go fast. And so this is an instance of a word where it's not being put in front of the clause, it's being put in the middle, that if you have cars, which is a subject, and then go, which is a verb, and then fast, you could say is, sort of adverb. But that sort of the word that breaks this up and makes it no longer a sentence because what do cars that go fast do? Cars that go fast are expensive. Cars that go fast use a lot of gas or electricity. We're not sure. And so this is an example of this word that right here, making this what would be independent now dependent, which is a great segue for going back to number 5, where we're going to say, all right, what can we put in front of I walk to school to make this incomplete? Well, there are a lot of things. You can honestly put any conjunction here, and, for, because, but, since, so, whatever you like from fanboys. And another thing that works really well is any WH word like while or when or which. I usually just use while I walk to school as the word to put in here to make it incomplete. And you can pretty quickly see while I walk to school, well, what happened while you were walking to school. And that's it for these examples. Hopefully this was helpful in showing you a good illustration of how to identify subject, verb, object in clauses and context. Okay, that's it for this video. A strong understanding of clauses is the cornerstone to being successful with punctuation and other types of questions on the SAT and ACT. We'll do videos on all the other major punctuation marks, so look out for those. If you found this material useful, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to Quad Education. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.